The project that I'm involved with, it uses a huge amount of data, much of it at the British Museum, but then half a dozen other museums. And much of it is from old museum collections. And there are some real difficulties when you're working with these collections. You need to build up an understanding of the collection, how it's been collected, how it's been curated, and whether it's actually been split between different museums, different collectors. People have quite often shied away from using these historic collections because they've kind of had this impression that they're not well provenanced enough to be used in rigorous modern day research. And this is why, with our project, Worthington Smith is a great example of how you can use these old collections and the value you can get out of them. He's something of a hero to Paleolithic archaeologists. He's way ahead of his time and played an important role in the formative years of British Paleolithic archaeologists. He's interested in reconstructing past landscapes, not just treasure hunting, and he's been inspired by Evans and his ancient stone implements. And much of it, he's the right man in the right place at the right time. By training, he was a draftsman, and actually later his son was interested in photography in the sort of early days. And he brings this huge amount of enthusiasm, and he's not a rich man, he's from, a quite comfortable middle-class background, but he's not with the likes of Evans. He's really good at bringing together, talking to sort of the great and the good, but he also talks with workmen. The reason he's important for the project is he left behind this great archive which relates to the huge collection of artefacts that he built up. We've got details about the context of the artefacts, whereas other people were just sort of, as I said, treasure hunting. Smith's interested in finding out where they came from, whether they actually came from the spot they're found. He's very proud of the fact that he never buys sort of an auction or anything, because he really wants to tie this into past lives, past landscapes. Just put this up. This is the kind of time that he's living in, that it's the early days of Paleolithic archaeologists, and once people start getting interested in these artefacts, there becomes a market for them. And Smith is kind of quite appalled by the fact that you can swap your hand axe for some gin or for some pints, something I've got to try at my local. But he's not doing this. He's very keen on, he's got a really sort of scholarly approach to what he's finding. He's also very aware that because there is this market for artefacts, there are people forging them, but there's also people getting artefacts from one site and pretending they come from somewhere else, a site where they know they can get more money for them. And he's quite assiduous in tracking down the actual proper origins for these. And for my project, which is mapping Paleolithic Britain, for the lower and middle Paleolithic, we need to actually go back and find where these artefacts are coming from, whether they're coming from different river terraces, and how that we can then map that into different use of landscape through the Paleolithic. This is just to sort of show you the time that Smith is living in. He's born in Shoreditch and he's living in this area and working in northeast London. And it's a time where there's this huge amount of building work going on. There's loads of pits that are open to get all the materials you need for your building, for your roads. And it's giving access to the landscape that we just don't have anymore. So that map is from the 1870s. By the 1890s, that's all built over. We don't have that access anymore. So this really shows you the value of these old collections that we need to bring out of these huge collections, everything we can, so we can then feed them into our modern day questions. Because we just can't go back and look at many of the areas where they were found. The catalogue that I'm using at the moment is Worthington Smith's list of Paleolithic implements. This is a bound volume, so again we've got that problem, we can't just feed it through a scanner. So we're just taking very simple photographs of it, which, because this is sort of add-on to my real day job. I'm kind of doing tea break, or I only get 5 minutes. We're lucky Smith's laid out his catalogue really nicely. It's got the artefact number, the date it's found, site details, if there's any sort of details about where it was found or how it was found. Smith's very good at noting that, okay, it came from this pile of gravel on this road, but actually I know that that gravel came from a pit 5-10 miles away. So that's telling us something quite different about the deposits that archaeology is coming from, and it's something that lots of collectors aren't recording. I mean, if they're recording anything, they're not recording in that much detail. The other lovely thing about the catalogue is that there's lots of social interest in there. Like we saw the sort of stories of people swapping their hand axes for beer, or the stories of the forgers, or just stories about the fact that there was one artefact which he'd gone out for a walk and he was looking at some deposits, and a chap comes up to him with a hand axe that he's found 5 years ago, so they go off to find out where he's got it from. He's able to point him in the exact direction. And I think this is one of the things that we've been able to do with this catalogue, is sort of draw people in, because there are stories there that sort of bring it alive. It's not just a list of hand axes and site names. It's quite intriguing. There's nice little stories there. He also records if he's given it away to someone or if it's gone to a museum. So this is just a screenshot of what you get when you go into Transcribe our catalogue. So it's very simple to just go through the ID, the dates found, the description, and then the dimensions. So most of the catalogue is laid out like this, so it's really quite straightforward. We've been using Twitter quite a lot to publicise it, and one of the things that's really nice about Paleolithic archaeologists on Twitter is that it's quite an active community, and because there's also the story there of sort of the history of the early days of Paleolithic archaeologists, people are interested in it from there. I'm sure many of you who are on Twitter will know Matt Pope, who does tweet an awful lot, so the fact that he's sort of encouraging people to spend their weekend helping us out, transcribing, it's great. That gives us a further reach, and then always trying to interact with the people who are getting involved with it. As you can see there, someone saying that he's one of his heroes, and just the contrast with other archaeologists working around in those early days, and trying to sort of get that conversation going, really play on the idea of it being a community. And then somebody getting involved who obviously knows Matt that I don't know, so getting involvement in that way. The other thing that we've been trying to do in the past anyway is something called Flint Friday, and this isn't just me. There's quite a lot of people who are involved in taking photos of flint objects and then tweeting them, get conversations going about it, but I've tied in our MicroPasts project with this, and then trying to think of ways that we can engage people, focusing on a lot of finds from London. And this was quite a nice example that I did recently, that the fact that it was from Stoke Newington, it got picked up by their local history society, and then sort of started getting a conversation going with them, and also with the other London archaeologists. So this is a way we've tried to sort of draw people in, and we're very early on in using this in our project. So I haven't had time to sort of analyse how much that does work, but we seem to be getting enough interactions and people interested, so it's just one way we're trying to engage people. I think in the future that if people are interested enough, that if someone's found a really interesting entry, can sort of offer to take a photo of that artefact so they can get that feedback as well. And this is just an example of sort of one of the little human interest stories that is behind this hand axe again. It's another London hand axe, and just the story that it's been found by this boy, and you know, it's different ways of sort of bringing the Paleolithic archaeology alive when sort of many people might find this quite dry, that you've got the social history there and the history of archaeology. So, as I say, we've only just started getting involved with the MicroPasts project, and so we're working with Dan, who's a co-I on the Mapping Paleolithic Britain project. We decided to pilot it with just 8 tasks to start with, and so 9 of the people who got involved with that were authenticated users, and having a look at the people that got involved, it's all people who are quite involved with the project anyway. We were really surprised, I think Dan was very surprised, that people were sort of so interested in the Paleolithic, and it got transcribed really quite quickly. So we then put up another 41 tasks, and at this stage you sort of start seeing people who are known within our archaeological community getting involved. So Peter Hoare is a geologist who has worked with Nick Ashton, the PI on my project, and he started getting involved with it. And he was involved because he's interested in the Paleolithic archaeology, but also interested in the entries that relate to an area he grew up in. And so I think this is another way of getting people involved, is playing on that sense of place, and people are really interested. Like we saw with the London tweets, people like seeing objects from an area they know well, and you find this engagement with it. We're now on the third task, the third set of data, which is 50 tasks, and when I looked last night it was 12% complete, and again, Peter Hoare is now up there on the leaderboard, so I think he is quite competitive, so whether that's a good thing or not. But I want to go back and have a look more at who's getting engaged with this and whether we are actually engaging. I'd like to sort of try and engage some of the Paleolithic archaeologists who are in London, and because the interesting thing, the catalogue doesn't just relate to finds that are in the British Museum, it also relates things in private collections and other museums. So if we can try and get that going as a sort of wider resource, that would be great. So for my project, the great thing about getting involved with this, that transcribing this catalogue really helps to provide the contextual details that make these artefacts really invaluable for my project of mapping Paleolithic Britain. So they're actually going to be of a real research value. It adds value to historic collections that have previously been neglected and that people may have thought weren't worthy of study, or, you know, weren't going to repay scientific study. It can draw together collections that have become dispersed over different museums or in private collections. At the end of it, it'd be nice if we can sort of track down where each object is now. That'd be brilliant. For Paleolithic archaeology, I think it would be nice if we can see it as a way of engaging people in an area of archaeology that is perhaps not so much in the public eye. It's definitely going to help with the research backlog we have. And we've heard today about how it's helping sort of rediscover lost resources. And we knew about this list that Worthington Smith had, and we always use it with our collections. But in my data collection for my project, I went recently to Cambridge Museum, and they had a catalogue there that they didn't know anything about the collector, and I was able to say, oh, he's one of the ones we've got at our museum. We don't know much about him, but I can tell you a little bit about him. And this is another catalogue which has this great contextual information from the early days of Paleolithic archaeology, so we can, again, add scientific value to these old collections, and I think that's really exciting. So I'd just like to say thank you for getting me involved with this project, and thank you to everybody that's been helping transcribe the catalogues, and yeah, thank you all for listening.